Give me a thumbs up. Excellent. Kirsten, thank you so much. Derek and Robert, thank you for being here today to share out what NGTOC over at USGS is up to. And for those that aren't aware, that's the National Geospatial Technical Operations Center. It's a mouthful. It's the folks that are providing that publicly available geospatial data products and services to the public and other government entities as well. And they successfully pushed on Agile about 10 years ago, migrated stuff to the cloud, pushing on DevOps and constantly learning and iterating. So it's always great to hear what they're doing today. They keep evolving. But briefly, we're going to be hosting this event monthly, as we have. And this is all really about bringing folks together in federal government, as well as those enabling federal government to help us all understand how they're driving IT modernization in government and better share out those lessons learned, those best practices, and probably most important, share the courage to change. I think that's what it comes down to, really. So what we're going to do, the format will be a short presentation, right? 15 minutes or so, followed up with some Q&A. Go ahead and drop your questions in the chat, and we'll MC those questions to the presenter during the Q&A. That just helps things stay organized. It's so folks aren't all trying to talk at the same time. But if we need to change that format, we can, but that's worked in the past. And we've already got folks scheduled out through July. So please keep coming back. Let your colleagues know what we're doing here. And that this is a really inexpensive meeting to participate in, and it's going to be valuable. But we're also going to get this recorded and online. Many folks are busy and they can't be at a particular point in time, and so that maybe they've got a calendar conflict. But we're hoping folks can partake even afterwards, or you all can share it with your colleagues on what you learned. But anyway, let others know about it. A couple other things we're going to be up to, though. We're going to be doing some bi-weekly tech syncs. This is going to allow vendors the opportunity to openly share the latest tools that are available to help government modernize their digital capabilities. If you're interested in participating in that, let me know, let Kirsten know. If you're a vendor that has a capability that you think can help or is helping some area of government, we want to get you on stage. It's really just going to be an open sharing environment that way. And then lastly, we've got a blog series that we're in the midst of building out. It's going to allow participants to share their opinion on what is digital modernization. When I was at USGS working with Derek and Robert, we did one similar called What is a Map? And it allowed some wonderful conversations around technology and product. We're hoping to do the same thing in this space. So we hope to start publishing these in the coming weeks as soon as we have a few in the backlog. If you're interested in writing to that, please reach out to me, and I'm going to share my email shortly. But without any further ado, Derek and Robert, over to you.
Thanks for that introduction, Brian. If we can go to that first slide. I think, Brian, you did a lot of this intro, but just for those of you that are unfamiliar with NGTOC, so NGTOC is the National Geospatial Technical Operations Center. We are the technical center that supports the National Geospatial Program. So, most of you are familiar with the National Map products, probably US Topo, maybe the National Hydrologic Data Set and the National Elevation Data Set. Those are some of the products that our teams of application developers put together. We'll go to the next slide and just kind of give you kind of an overview of the development teams that I'm responsible for. So we have Hydro and Elevation, publish maps. So those are the US Topo products. Delivery, that's how the information gets out to the general public. So probably National Map Viewer, for those of you that are coming to our site to download any of our digital elevation, Hydro, or Topo products. And then kind of the back end, business systems and data management, those are the applications on which our systems rest. So we have a core data schema, a core data system that was recently migrated from Oracle to Postgres. So we are now kind of an open source data shop running PostGIS and Postgres. The derived product generation team runs the product on demand, the map generation system that pushes US topo out. Our new teams are dynamic mapping. So we just had a public launch of something called TopoBuilder. So those are public on-demand custom maps. You go to topobuilder.com, and then you can generate your own US topo-like off-grid, off-center map. And then that is delivered to you for download. And then you can get the GeoTIFF or GeoPDF products. And then we're moving forward toward an elevation-derived hydrography product. And finally, our DevOps team. So our DevOps team provides overall support for all of the development teams and really has pushed the virtualized infrastructure and infrastructure as code that all of our systems now run on. And that's why really, I just wanted to provide the introduction and then hand off to our cloud DevOps architect, Robert Jershai, who's really been instrumental in leading our teams and developing the foundation on which our applications rest. So with that, hand it over to you, Robert.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you, Brian and Derek, for that introduction. My name is Robert Jershai, and I am a NGTOC cloud architect and DevOps team lead. And just like Derek said, we're kind of like starting for the past 2 years. We've created this new team that is kind of needs to sit between the dev and the ops in this whole new DevOps methodology that everyone is trying to implement. So what is DevOps, right? So word itself explains a lot. Development and operation. That's an enterprise software development phrase used to mean a type of agile relationship between these two groups, between the development and the operations. And the goal of DevOps is to change and improve the relationship by advocating for better communication and collaboration between these two business units. In the past, these two business units, in our case, were pretty disconnected. And of course, that's where our DevOps team goal of our DevOps team is to build the bridges between the two groups. And the way DevOps works is by extending the lean and agile mindset the development has to the operation folks with focus on automation, and which in turn, it will drive faster development and deployment of the application. But in addition, it will also turn into elevated response times in case something goes wrong. So the whole fail fast and recover fast approach becomes a de facto standard in the DevOps world. So infrastructure as a code was our first thing that we wanted to implement with our whole DevOps, new DevOps approach. So, and basically what that means is that, we had to have this automation mindset. We had to build the CI/CD centric approach. CI/CD stands for continuous integration, continuous delivery and deployment pipelines. And we had to kind of move away from hands-on management and operational strategies going forward. We wanted to minimize that human intervention. And there's a lot of tools out there that we have ability to pick from to work with when automation comes in mind. We moved quickly to that. It's also known in industry as infrastructure as a code. And just like I said, there's a lot of tools like Terraform, AWS CDK, Packer, Pulumi, and there's a plethora of others as well. And we, NGTOC, we kind of had this, we were trying to kind of find which tool is the best for our case and need. One minor detail here is that 5 years ago, we moved to the cloud, and in that first year, we were actually pretty new to it. So there was a little bit of a learning curve there. And there was a lot of tools that we didn't know about that we kind of picked up along the way. And so some of these tools, obviously there was also tools that we tried to use, they didn't work out, and we simply moved on to something better. And we came also to realization that we cannot, we need to minimize the human intervention, and all of our infrastructure needs to be immutable. It needs to be configured by code, and it needs to be discarded and moved to something new once the issues arise, if they do arise at all. And we implemented or adopted this pets versus cattle approach. So what is pets versus cattle? So think of it as think of how much bandwidth a person puts into caring for a pet, like a puppy or a kitten, and versus how much care goes into maintaining a herd of cows on a farm. So the pet service model definitely describes a carefully, you're worrying about your servers that are, they're nurtured, and you give them names, and they're kind of part of your family. So you call them, I don't know, Zeus, Apollo, or Athena, and you care for them. You know everything about them. And when they start to fail or struggle, you kind of nurse them to back to health and scale them up, and make sure they're working once again, and so on. On the other hand, cattle is kind of different. Like, we don't really have much time to manage all these servers at scale. So that's kind of the other side of the spectrum. They're not afforded, these servers and these resources are not afforded the same loving attention like our pets. And this service model typically tags servers as server 1, 2, 3, and so on. We don't really care about their names, and if one dies, or if one is misbehaving, we simply replace him with the next one with a perfect clone. So what are the immediate benefits that we start seeing? There's actually quite a few of them, so I tried to kind of identify some of them. And that is the multiple teams start sharing the same accounts, and we made sure that they're not stepping on each other's toes. And this was kind of interesting, because we have a lot of teams, like just Derek showed. So it was, and some teams are already in the cloud, some teams are in the process of going to cloud, and some teams are still on-prem, trying to figure out, like, how do we transition into the cloud? It was kind of interesting, because we needed to act fast and act quickly, because we have limited environment well, not limited, but we had our environment with a limited capacity, so we need to make sure that everyone is playing nicely in the cloud. So out of that, a tagging strategy had to be devised and implemented to quickly identify the underlying resources for better cost tracking and then overall management. We wanted to make sure that people don't really step on each other's toes. And of course, the increased focus on automation and repeatability was something that was kind of out of the gate. We were set on winning the hearts and minds of people who previously managed this type of infrastructure manually for years, and we advocated for do more with less effort type of a mindset. So we kind of succeeded in that, and provisioning of these resources definitely changed a long time during our DevOps implementation. So we went we went from months down to minutes, which was a really dramatic shift for the center. And of course, just like I mentioned before, CI/CD has quickly proven to be a very, very important component of our DevOps strategy. It really allowed us to decouple development from operations and deployment, and it was very beneficial in production environments that had very limited access. The next one is that we had to embrace the convention over configuration approach, and this is a software design paradigm that attempts to decrease the number of decisions that a developer is required to make without necessarily losing flexibility. Think of it as us putting the guardrails for these developers that are new to their environment, whether that's on-prem or cloud. So we don't want them to really worry too much about the underlying infrastructure. They should be worrying about their applications and their business requirements. And we started building a lot of more reusable infrastructure as a code components that allow development teams to rapidly provision unnecessary resources and necessary infrastructures for their projects. And there's also where the reusability came. And of course, we're trying to share that not just within our group, but also within the bureau and the department. And finally, we are currently working on creation of the change advisory board. So we were going so fast that there was a lot of teams trying to do a lot of things in the cloud, not just the cloud, but on-prem and cloud, and kind of move into this world of DevOps. That it was a little bit of a fast-paced environment, and when the dust settled, we decided to, and just still work in progress on creating a control management board that will allow us to better manage current and future projects. And cloud is a ever-changing landscape, or to be honest with you, both on-prem and cloud are ever-changing landscapes, and we need to make sure that we keep up with the emerging technologies while minimizing the operational overhead, so that way we don't, just like I said, do more with less. So initially, the learning curve was very steep with our DevOps approach. The comfort zone of many IT personnel was in the realm of following the standard operating procedure document, and you simply checking the boxes when provisioning new resources, and everything being done manually by hand. And quickly we realized that this is not scalable, and something had to change. Our production environment was locked down by default, so provisioning of any resources manually was out of the question, and that was not an ideal solution. And this was obviously a new environment for everybody, and we were mapping the uncharted territories of DevOps in our center. And we decided that it's okay to start the level 0 back a couple of years ago. And simply level up as time goes. And for that first portion, we're really big into doing things by hand, using tools, GUI tools. And then we kind of moved into our logical next step was like to build our own tooling where, while we were learning the ins and outs of the underlying platform. And we've created many homebrew scripts and pipelines and some of them that set precedents at the Bureau. And these pipelines were actually very, or these tools were kind of very rudimentary, and some of them were kind of very, very verbose and very kind of specific and not shareable. So our next step was like, okay, we need to go to something better. And that was the level 2, which was the declarative infrastructure as a code. We started using tools, just like I said, Terraform, CDK, and a few other tools. And this was actually pretty good. There was also, obviously, with anything that you do in the DevOps world or in development world in general, there's a learning curve, and our engineers actually had to kind of relearn some of the components, and especially with the Terraform, there was a little bit of a learning curve there that we had to migrate what we currently had to something new, and that kind of goes into level 3, and that's where we start using even more advanced things. We're kind of like, to be honest with you, we're sitting comfortably. That's our comfort zone between level 2 and level 3. Developers feel very comfortable using either Terraform or CDK. They like that ability to use a programming language to provision the underlying resources. Frankly, it's much easier finding a developer who knows programming languages, and their kind of pathway to becoming an infrastructure engineer and understanding how to provision the underlying infrastructure is quite shorter than if you would say like, hey, let's grab someone with a scripting background and doing everything by hand. So that level 3, just like I said, level 2, level 3 is where our current comfort zone is, and we're obviously looking what's next. And we've observed a lot of patterns during our DevOps implementation. There was obviously initial lift and shift. Let's not really, re-architect anything and whatnot. And then as we're moving to more cloud-like or cloud-based platforms, we start building these EC2-based solutions. Sometimes they were truly like re-importing them, and sometimes we had to actually re-architect them. And as we were doing this, we started noticing an interesting thing, and that is that our development team started thinking a little bit ahead and then saying, hey, why moving from lift and shift to EC2 based solution? Those are kind of apples to apples. Why not simply start moving our applications into containers or using serverless technologies like Lambda, for example? So we started noticing that shift where we enabled our developers to not really worry about the underlying infrastructure, but to worry about their applications, to worry about their business logic and processes that they're trying to accomplish. And of course, natural progression with containers and lambdas and whatnot, serverless, was like, okay, orchestration and management, how do we handle this at scale? Because think about it, when you're moving from server into containers, that is like moving from a very, very small set of instances that we need to manage, moving into kind of like a huge ecosystem and huge number of containers and microservices that are flying around, and it kind of gets like that scale is can sometimes be very overwhelming. And of course, our natural progression was, okay, different teams, different requirements. Some teams want to launch applications, some teams want to do a hardcore processing, and then some teams want to do something totally different. And then that kind of falls into like, do we use Kubernetes? Do we use ECS, which is Elastic Container Service, that's AWS Container Orchestrator, or do we simply say, hey, no, don't worry about containers. Let's go into the world of serverless and let's rewrite all of their applications as a bunch of functions that run on top of servers that we don't have to manage. And of course, just like I said, processing, that kind of goes hand in hand with AWS Batch and the whole container-based processing. Our Kubernetes was kind of interesting. This is just one of the things that we're currently working on. We use GitLab. Our cloud hosting system is our kind of big brother in the cloud. That is our platform provider, and we have a subset of AWS components that we can use in the cloud. So what you can see here is the interaction with our Kubernetes cluster, for example, for our ArcGIS on Kubernetes implementation. And we have internal GitLab server. That is our CI/CD pipeline. That's pretty much what does all the heavy lift and shift with the heavy lift and shift in the development and production environment. And we have our NGTOC AWS account. We have multiple AWS accounts, but you can see that there's no developers jumping in the account itself and start provisioning the resources. Everything is done through a remote executor, our CI/CD pipeline on GitLab. And one benefit of this is that we can manage more. We like here on the screen, you're seeing only one Kubernetes cluster that is being managed this way, but we can manage as many as we want to. And that's the beauty of it, that we don't really need to scale on the left-hand side. We don't need more developers. Everything that needs to be scaled is pretty much automated. That's in the middle, and that's easily scalable and reusable. So. And then good intro into the Ortho Imagery MRF, and this is where I'm going to talk a little bit about serverless. So what is the Ortho Imagery MRF? MRF stands for Meta Raster Format. It is a NASA and ESRI sponsored format for serving imagery on the in the cloud in a most economical fashion. So we wanted to serve the nationwide NAPE imagery web service, and that's something that we do on-prem, for example, with a one server that is, or a couple, maybe not one, but two maybe servers. They're very bulky servers, and we really wanted to kind of explore the ability to move this to the cloud and use the MRF technology to serve terabytes and terabytes of data. And what this allows, it allows viewing of digital mapping without downloading imagery. So everything is service-based. And NAIPS obviously stands for National Agriculture Imagery Program. And just like I said, all of our NAIP imagery is around 16 plus terabytes that we want to serve to public, and we want to continuously upgrade this service. What's interesting is that with the Ortho Imagery MRF, several groups with the Forest Service and USGS and few others came together and said, like, hey, how can we use Kubernetes, ArcGIS on Kubernetes, and how can we start serving the Ortho Imagery MRFs on that service? So there was a lot of new components out there that or emerging technologies that we really wanted to provide to the public. And this is basically what we want to serve. We want to serve the United States imagery to pretty much public and everybody. Mine is the few section there with the Area 51 and some snow-covered mountains in Montana. But we wanted to allow our users to have this imagery service and to be capable of doing some dynamic visualizations on top of the service itself. And these raster function templates, they would let users to do whatever they need to do with service. If we want to, with the image underlying image, if they want to show it in a natural color or false color composite or an NDVI color and so on. This is all capable of doing happening on the fly. We don't have really this on-prem, because on-prem, regardless of our whether it was on-prem or the cloud, but we didn't have this with our traditional approach of provisioning a single or maybe two servers to perform under workload. So we had to kind of move to that new paradigm of, hey, we want to make sure this scales for the users, and especially because we're adding more and more features, just like I said, the dynamic visualizations that really required ability to scale on demand. And basically, we've took serverless. Initially, we used to have one giant EC2 instance that would crunch through this data, and we said, like, well, this is not really going to work. We need to scale out, we need to scale out fast. And we need to be capable of listening to the new, or should I say, feeling for the new data, and then introducing that new data or pushing it over to our published service. So we took portion of that process and we converted it to serverless. So, the process where we acquire source imagery, translate to MRF, extract metadata, do a lot of stuff at once. We had to kind of move that away from previous procedural type of processing and kind of do a distributed processing on it. And of course, we still use EC2 base for creating the mosaic, kind of stitching everything together and publishing the service. But that's the very, very small part. The heavy lift happens on the serverless side. And this is what that looks like. And I mean, it's really mind-boggling when you think about it, that hey, there's some functions out there running on on a server that I don't have to maintain. All I need to make sure is that my process knows where to grab the data, knows where to put the data, and writes that job queue or that metadata about the job status, and then make sure that it can run within the limits of the AWS Lambda Functions, which is 15 minutes. And this is something that we're very proud of, because we're capable. These functions are capable of scaling. I would say almost indefinitely, but remember, we're sharing the account with the rest of the group, so we need to play nicely, right? And this is where the DevOps kicks in, and we have these guardrails and kind of invisible walls to make sure that one team does not overburden Lambda functionality for everyone sharing the account. And last but not least, I would like to share with the group our latest kind of crown jewel, and that is the TopoBuilder application launch. This is yet another, this is just like Derek mentioned before, our newly created dynamic mapping team. This is their first application that was in the process of launching for maybe like a year or so, and of course they started kind of cloud native implementation. Original scale of this application was to produce 10,000 maps per year. Our system actually produced 19,000 maps in the first 25 days. And this would not be possible if we didn't have DevOps in place and if we didn't have the infrastructure that we worked so hard for the past couple of years implementing that and living and breathing in the DevOps culture in our center, because it enabled these high volume scalable systems to run at a velocity never seen before. And we took this map generation on another level. So I would highly, if you like maps and you would like to build a custom maps or grab some of the predefined maps, I would invite you to go to topobuilder.nationalmap.gov and submit your maps, and in a couple of days you will receive your map in your email. And this is what the DevOps is all about. It allowed us, like in the past, this would just totally bog down our kind of hands-on provisioning methodology that we have in place. And the fact that we moved to the DevOps and automation and repeatability, we were able to scale this on demand and pretty much just scale when you need to scale. When there's a demand, scale up, and then when there's no demand, scale down. So again, topobuilder.nationalmap.gov. Please give it a try if you're into maps like we are. So, thank you so much. This is my and Derek's email. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, comments, or if you want to kind of take the conversation to in a different direction or another level. So, thank you.
Robert, thank you. There's been questions kind of going, and Derek, thanks for answering some of them, especially around the DevOps team. Anyone have any other questions for Robert? From Graham Baggett over at Census, it looks like the CD pipelines do not need any manual approval from authorizing officials. Can you talk about how you convinced your senior management to adopt that approach as opposed to a more human in the loop model where every pipeline run needs prior manual approval?
Yeah, absolutely. So just like I said, automation pipelines like CI/CD pipelines were pretty new to us at the time back in whatever 2015, 2016, and the fact that the management actually saw that the velocity in from progressing from idea down to like here's the minimum viable product / deployment. That was kind of our selling factor, saying like, hey, look, we automated this whole thing. And just what I also want to kind of touch on is the part of the approval and authorizing. Our teams, development teams, actually have that authority, and the fact that we can recover from it and revert back to a previous state, that was kind of a win-win for us, because if something goes wrong, of course, minus the vandalism that really cannot really happen because we have those mechanisms in place to prevent, and multiple folks need to kind of sign off on things before it reaches the production. But we kind of assimilated that into developers' everyday model rather than having a gatekeeper. They're the gatekeepers. They're the developers, but they're also the gatekeepers at the same time, and they kind of have this circle of trust with their development team to push new features or bug fixes. Hopefully that answered your question, Graham.
Yeah, I think part of what really helped was that the DevOps team was made up of both IT and developers. So that was a bridge between kind of the people responsible for our security and traditionally provisioning our systems. And the IT side helped to set the security stance, and really the images themselves were really built in large part in close coordination with IT. Then the runners for provisioning those were then set up to allow developers to provision these approved instances. And it was kind of this kind of constant communication to make sure that no one was just, going out there and provisioning compute instances that hadn't been approved and reviewed. So Robert was coordinating a lot of that. And that really built a lot of trust with the development team, that IT really felt that they were comfortable having the developers spin up the instances as they needed. And they really had to once we got into autoscale groups. Autoscale groups are creating ephemeral instances, on demand. And those things just have to be approved beforehand.
Yeah.
And then allowed to run.
Yeah, and we put these guardrails in place for developers, to prevent them from straying away and creating something that they're not supposed to create. Now this is still work in progress, and I'm seeing some of the chats there, like culture change. There was definitely a culture change because ops was more like, hey, we cannot really let developers do whatever they want to do, and developers were always like, hey, ops doesn't really understand how our application works, so how would they know how to scale it, how to maintain it, how to make sure it's working? And so we were kind of sitting between two groups and simply reconnecting or building bridges between two groups by putting the automation and infrastructure as code in place. And were people worried about the job, losing their jobs? Not really, because obviously we had a lot of infrastructure, we had a lot of institutional knowledge that we simply needed to level up to a different path that we're taking now, and that is the that is the DevOps, and in our case, AWS. We're using AWS as our cloud provider. And a lot of folks, what was really interesting is that at the beginning, obviously, everyone has it's a steep learning curve, but then there's that aha moment when they're like, wait a second, I can spin up 10 instances in a matter of like a couple of minutes, and all of them going to look exactly the same, and I don't need to jump on each one of them to do work. Wow, sign me up for it. So there was definitely that aha moment with the folks, and then that cultural change that was quickly adopted. I'm saying quickly adopted over the course of the last 5 years. I'm gonna just Brian, do you want to kind of feed me questions?
Next one would be Jim McAndrews there about, hey, have you used AWS Fargate for anything? Do you have to use Linux or Windows STIGs on AWS?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jim. Yes, we are using AWS Fargate, and without going into a lot of details, just so folks understand what we're talking about, you have the easy button, which is AWS Fargate, which will launch ECS or Kubernetes clusters for you, or you have, hey, do it yourself, but through a managed service, which is kind of, the non-easy button route. And we're using both. It all depends on which team wants to use what. So yeah, we're absolutely enjoying these new, managed services. So that way we don't really have to, we can cut the operational overhead. Do we use Linux and Windows STIGs? Absolutely. So we are using Linux and Windows and on AWS, and bear in mind that Linux is obviously the kind of de facto standard of cloud. Windows is still work in progress, so there's a lot that we're kind of pushing boundaries within the bureau. So NGTOC is definitely pushing boundaries, especially since we're a geospatial shop. ESRI is one of the main tools that we use, and that is kind of that puts us in that Windows world. And we are definitely seeing progress on that, and a kind of movement on that higher level where stigging and how do we maintain cattle now we're good about maintenance of pets, but how do we do that on the cattle level? How do we make sure that everything is patched, staked, properly provisioned, reports back to whatever tracking mechanisms and software we have in place, and so on. So yeah, it's still work in progress, but it's definitely happening.
And next question from Pradeep. Does your DevOps handle zero trust?
Yeah, so this is something very, very new to us as well. I mean, to pretty much the whole bureau, USGS bureau, from the cloud perspective. And that's something that we will be kind of like zero trust is not a one thing that you simply flip a switch. It's definitely simply like us accepting and incorporating DevOps culture into our group. That's something that we'll have to start live and breathe. I must say definitely that we have that sort of a zero trust approach with the, hey, you cannot really jump into production anymore and do things manually. Everything needs to be done through the CI/CD pipeline and so on. So we are definitely kind of, I wouldn't say halfway there, but we're already seeing the benefits of zero trust, where we're kind of enabling our developers to build their applications and processes and whatnot with a zero trust in mind, because we want them to only request the access that they need, not simply provide blanket statements for everybody. Now, are we there yet? Obviously not. Like we're working on it, and we're iterating and getting better and better at creating things that can live out there in a remote area in our development and production environment, and that are kind of, I hate to use this term, but self-aware, that they can simply create what they need. So these solutions, they can only create what they need, and they have to live within these boundaries that we would set up, so that way we can promote zero trust and have these multi-tenant developers or multi-tenant development teams pushing their application, knowing that no one's going to step on their toes.
And one more question from Graham over at Census. And Derek, I think some of your textual comments there addressed it, but I'm going to kick it out there anyway if y'all just want to verbalize it for the video. Can you talk about the ATO process? How did you convince your security team that your environment meets the relevant NIST security controls? So
I'm glad that you mentioned that. So this is the part of having the cloud hosting systems platform team. They're the ones who are putting these pillars in place that we as NGTOC, we're just one team that uses this platform. They take care of the security controls and kind of like implementing that security layer. That is not something that we do. We simply, and this is kind of interesting because I sit on that team as a contributor, but I'm also part of the development team or NGTOC team, right, as a DevOps lead. And I understand what our requirements are, and I'm trying to figure out whether, on the other side of the spectrum, which is CHS, if they can, support our needs. And whether there are any like security issues or anything like that we should be aware of. So from that perspective, I want to say that it's kind of easier for us and the team because we're building on something that's already pre-created. And the CHS Cloud Hosting Systems group within the USGS, it's actually their job to maintain the platform, to make sure that everyone has these accounts, that our accounts properly secure, that they're monitoring things on those accounts.
So it's actually a little more complicated than that, in that you have our cloud hosting solutions provider, they have an ATO. So that means that the GovCloud services have an ATO, and only certain services that have been pre-approved are accessible to us. So this is not Amazon public cloud. So this is GovCloud, quite a few restrictions. We sit behind a firewall, a WAF, several layers then of security. So internal systems have one set of rules to go through. Then if you have an application that needs to be public facing, that has to go through a whole series of tests, and we have to clear those. We just did that with TopoBuilder. That takes about it took us about a month to get through. And then instances, so the compute instances and Windows instances specifically have to be STIG'd in order to run and operate, even within that sort of restrictive environment where you don't have public access, it's only internal. So there's a couple layers, and it's hard to go into every avenue for security. But for the cloud environment, we're a little protected because that operates behind a firewall, and that's already been ATO'd.
Yeah, and just a minor correction there, Derek. We are in the public AWS. CHS is our big brother that makes sure that we have guardrails. We as a group, NGTOC, we have the guardrails, just like you explained, of services that we can use and services that are approved for use and that they have ATO in place. For folks who are kind of new to the USGS and Department of Interior, there are two major providers there, GeoPlatform, and GeoPlatform operates, I believe in both public AWS and CloudGov, or GovCloud, sorry. Of course, CHS is pretty much the in air quotes, big brother sitting between us and the public AWS and telling us what we can and what we cannot use.
This has been great. I'm going to apologize to folks who went a little long, but there was a lot to talk about. Robert and Derek, thank you so much for sharing everything. There's a kind of not just a thread, but a rope that was thrown out there about a DevOps team helping facilitate the change, the cultural, the process, and the technical. Because when I was at 18F, there would be criticism leveled at that. But then there's the realities inside government and legacy systems, legacy organizations, people that have been around a while, and you can't assume things are just going to automatically switch and change. And I'd love to get you all on stage to just talk about that DevOps team, because it's such a fascinating tweak to the method.
That would require, I think a timeline would be good, right? To show that iterative progress of where we started. Yep. So you always have that innovation element. And then you want to formalize that. And you've seen that, right? You've seen how that spark happens, and then it sort of runs. But then you have to start to figure out how you evenly distribute that so that you don't just have one team that saw the light and is doing it a particular way. You really want that to propagate, and you need to help that differential, because not everyone runs at the same speed. And so that DevOps team that then rotates amongst your teams, and do you have the benefit of multiple teams, right? Do you have, because if you only have one team, okay, there's that's it, that's your DevOps team. But if you have multiple teams and you have IT support and you're trying to manage that, you really do have that cultural change agent that you need to put in place.
And I also would like to add that folks like Derek and Brian, that type of management that fosters the change and kind of pushes you over the edges is definitely what helped DevOps team, because DevOps team didn't even exist a couple of years ago. It was created on my whiteboard with Derek, kind of brainstorming what can we do better to kind of bridge that dev and ops and make two groups play along. So that's one of the things that is very important in your organization, to have a management that embraces the change.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then there was a question about kind of that senior leadership, right? So it helps that I sit in as a senior manager on the leadership team, and then work with our executive leadership, right? That's our CIO, and Robert is a technical bridge, and my counterpart over in IT, we have an IT services chief as well as a development chief. Then we make sure that we're supporting Robert in his requests for services. So someone asked about Fargate, we had to make certain requests for serverless, for FSX, for a lot of things that didn't come with the CHS or GovCloud environment. And so we have to kind of push up on that and look for ways to make sure that we're collaborating and trusting each other to implement these new requests.
Hey,
And
Robert,
so there's that connection. Yep.
I have a question. This is Ross Ford at CISA. Did you guys use digital services or 18F to help you with this? Or did you guys kind of like pilot and go on your own on this?
We tried. We were not
Yeah, we
given
tried.
permission to use. I thought it was a good idea to try to use. Brian, it's cloud.gov.
Yeah, cloud.gov.
We tried because that would have been the easiest way for us. That's already.
Yep.
It's a kind of that in and out menu, right? 4 items, pick from one of those, and you're already secured, ATO'd, ready to go. It just was not in the cards for us. We tried. And so we really had to use the pathway that was provided to USGS specifically. Yep.
Thanks.
Great question, Ross.
It
Otherwise,
is.
thank you
It
all. We'll get this posted. Stay active on LinkedIn. We'll be putting this this content out there for y'all. Share it, please. And I hope you all show up again. Invite your colleagues for next month, and be looking forward to that blog series that's coming, as well as our tech sinks. We want to get those vendors up on stage as well to share how certain capabilities can help on this transformation effort. And then Eric and Robert, I want to meet up here in the coming weeks and talk about maybe that cultural piece and the DevOps team. That's a wonderful thread, I think, to keep pulling on. So maybe getting you on stage next fall or something to share out on that. So anyway, thank you all. You have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.